I believe if you understand the principles of writing, you'll know how to fashion a story that works, but you'll do it in your own voice. And your voice is your number one asset that you have. Nobody can do you but you. And so if you can understand what makes a story work and get that into your unconscious mind, when you're writing, it's going to start flowing into the proper format that judges and editors recognize that this is a professionally written story. This is publishable. And that's the problem, is that aspiring writers don't know that. They're in the dark. And so you'll still get there stumbling about in the dark. But isn't it better if you have somebody that's already been up the mountain and he says, hey, here's a clear-cut path. This is what I did to get here. And I'll show you, watch out for this spot. That's a bad one.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 341 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have an interview with Wolf Moon. Wolf Moon is a best-selling writer, editor, and writing instructor. At the age of 15, Moon won the National Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. He followed that with winning the Star Trek Strange New Worlds contest and Writers of the Future. He leads the Wolfpack Writers Group and is the author of the illustrated Super Secrets of Writing and How to Write a Howling Good Story. Moon and I have an in-depth, emotional, and impactful and inspiring conversation. And that's coming up later in this episode. But first, let's hear a word about this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Stark Publishing and the book, How to Write a Howling Good Story. Oh my, isn't that convenient that this is my podcast and I'm putting my own ad in here for what I think is an awesome book. Now, How to Write a Howling Good Story, of course, is the content, is the topic of this episode. But let me tell you a little bit about the book. Because in the interview, we mentioned the book and we mentioned some of the details of things that get into making a good story. But let me tell you a little bit about the book itself. Now, How to Write a Howling Good Story is an award-winning resource to help writers craft professional stories that sell. Wolf Moon has been called the guru of aspiring writers, and his super secrets have been hailed by professional editors, best-selling writers, and a respected Hollywood screenwriter as a new breakthrough in understanding fundamental story elements and how to make them work for you. Now, since this book was launched in November of 2023, Wolf and I have received numerous accolades from people who've picked up the book and said, I have never read such a fantastic book about the craft of writing in my life. High praise indeed, and definitely worth checking out. There'll be a link in the show notes at starkreflections.ca as to where you can pick up the book in print. It's available in hardcover, in paperback, and in ebook. But very, very special deal is you can get this book as a listener of the Stark Reflections podcast. You can get this book in ebook format. It is regularly $9.99, but there's a special 25% off coupon code. If you go and pick up the book before the end of January 2024 at smashwords.com, you can get it for 25% off. But wait, there's more. Patrons of the Stark Reflections podcast, because you guys are so awesome, can pick up the book for 75% off. That's right, $2.50 instead of $9.99. And again, that's at Smashwords, but that'll be via a special coupon code that you'll be able to pick up as patrons via the notification you get from patreon.com/starkreflection. So again, the book is available anywhere books are available to be sold. In ebook, it is regularly $9.99 US. There is a special coupon code that is available to anyone who goes to the Smashwords store until the end of January 2024. So February 1st, that's gone. It expires. But patrons until the end of February will have access to a coupon code that'll allow you to get this book for $2.50. And that is The Super Secrets of Writing by Wolf Moon. And this is How to Write a Howling Good Story. And now back to our regular content after this bumper. And now for comments from recent episodes. On the YouTube channel, for episode 340, that was the interview with Todd Fonestock, Nikki Gerlain commented, "This guest has great energy." And I said it more like, I guess I said it kind of like Bill Shatner, but it's like, this guest has great energy. And I agree with you, Nikki. Todd's energy was so infectious. It was so wonderful, and such a great interview to do. I'm so glad that you enjoyed that. Additional comment I got from Edwin Downward, and Edwin said, "I love the way Todd promos his story. The energy and enthusiasm he brings to his game is contagious. It's exactly the kind of thing I've been working on since I heard Susie Vidori using a similar way to introduce new readers to her stories at Wine Country Writers Festival last September. We need more examples like this to help us craft our own presentations." I could not agree with you more, Edwin. Thanks so much. And I'll also include a link to an interview I did with Susie Vidori on this podcast a couple years back now. And I've done some virtual book launches with Susie during the pandemic. But yeah, the energy, the enthusiasm, and the skill of in-person selling. So both Todd and Susie have that incredible ability and the charm and charisma and the ability to just connect with people as an in-person storyteller. And I'm going to do my best to bring more people like that onto the show so you and I can learn more from the amazing stuff that they do. So thank you so much, Nikki. Thank you, Edwin, for your comments. You can leave comments for any episode at starkreflections.ca. You can also leave them on YouTube and other places where the podcast is posted. And I do appreciate your comments because it helps me understand the things that you are reflecting on. In terms of personal updates, wow, it's been an insane busy week. I spent last weekend. I left Thursday to be in Pennsylvania, north of Philadelphia, hanging out with dear friend Kevin Anderson and attending the Rush tribute concert in honor of Neil Peart and raising money for brain cancer research, the brain cancer that Neil died of 4 years ago, and. What a powerful and emotional event is, and Kevin and I were blubbering. Certain songs came on, just such a lovely experience, such an incredibly powerful experience. But the powerful experience, which I think is important, is all of these strangers, 1,400 people in a room, watching this band, amazing musicians, a whole group of like a dozen different musicians, playing the music of these three men who created Rush, and moving us in such a powerful way. I was at the table with Kevin, helping him sell. He wrote a lot of, he co-authored books with Neil, Clockwork Angels and the two follow-ups, and some short stories and some other stuff that he did with Neil, and we were selling those books. It was amazing because we were right at the opening as people are coming in. I overheard people going, "That's Kevin Anderson. I've read his Star Wars books, or I've read his Dune books," and stuff like that. And then even the reaction that some people had, they were just so excited to meet Kevin, and of course to realize that he is such a great guy, down to earth, friendly, and of course I was like, "Hey, why don't I get a picture of you with Kevin?" And they were just over the moon with joy. Because as writers, that's something that we do. We really can create emotional experiences for readers. And we don't often get to see that. So there I was at a concert where we were appreciating music, because music is something you can enjoy as a community and is often more something that happens out in public. Writing doesn't very often happen out in public. But in those rare moments where you get a chance where the reader and writer get to connect, and the reader gets to see the writer and shake their hand and get to know them, that's really beautiful. And it reminds me of that value of what it is that we do as writers and putting stuff in the world. And we will most often never know. We'll never know the impact of those things that we put out there. But we're doing it often in silence. And people are appreciating, often in silence, because, God knows we don't get nearly as many reviews as we deserve. He's like, yeah, but I sold thousands of copies of this book and I have 20 reviews. It's a sad reality. So there are more people enjoying our books than we will ever hear of, but that's okay, because, I write the stories, and I would still write the stories even if I never heard that they moved people. But every once in a while I hear from someone who appreciated the things that I wrote. And more often than not, it's other writers who know. So they say, hey, I read Wide for the Wind. I really liked it. I benefited, etc. So other writers tend to be a lot more gracious about stuff like that. Not that you would know it from the reviews online for Wide for the Wind, but I'm not complaining. I'm just saying I do appreciate when people take the time to reach out, because it reminds me of the value of what it is that we as creative people, as storytellers, bring to the world. In terms of writing, I'm back on, I've got some short stories. I have to write a couple short stories. I have to still continue with the novel, as well as a few of my non-fiction projects. And of course, my Masters of Publishing program has started, and the homework has begun. And there's been lots of homework, and I know there's going to be more, but I am absolutely loving this program, and actually a little bit, I'm going to be sad, because I know that this year, it's only a 1-year program, it's going to end at the end of July, and I am quite enjoying that Western Colorado University Masters of Publishing program. But that's it for my personal update in the introductory matter. Hey, how about you and I? Come on with me. You and I, just take my hand. Well, you don't have to take my hand if you don't want to. You can walk beside me. Let's just walk this way. I'm going to introduce you to Wolf Moon, and I know you're going to have a really good time listening to this conversation. And that's coming up right after this slightly longer bumper. Hey, Wolf, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Mark. I appreciate it. No Barnaby today, huh?
No, Barnaby's just over there. He's leaning on a chair. He didn't want to hog any of the spotlight. This is going to be, it's all about you today, my friend.
All right. That's good.
All right. So before we get into some of the things that we wanted to talk about, let's get the man behind the howl. Let's get into a little bit about, so Wolf Moon, and that's WULFMOON, is not the name you were given at birth, right?
It may not have been, but
but where did it come from?
My grandmother is Ojibwe, Chippewa, and
Okay.
and she raised us when my parents split up. My mom left us with her, went off to Chicago, and so grandma raised us. And so that Moon name comes from her. I've been called Moon all my life.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And
okay, so it's based on family nomenclature then. And your nickname when you were a child was Moon. That's what
Moon.
she called you?
Yeah. My dad actually named the road we were on Moonbeam Road after me. I was the oldest kid. So I have a sign over here. It says Moonbeam Road. People stole that sign continuously off the corner of our drive. I was out in the country. A weird thing is, it came back to me one day when my brother invited me over to meet his girlfriend, and it was hanging on her bedroom wall. So
And you're like,
at the end of the night, she gave it to me. She said, you should have this. I stole it with my girlfriend's off the corner of your sign late at night. So it's funny how life comes around decades later.
So obviously this is Moon's been a name that's been with you since you've been little, but then when you were looking at was it the writer's name that you decided you were going to write under Wolf Moon? At what point did that become that you knew that was your nom de plume?
Well, yeah. So I had a different name, which was necessary because I had a really rough childhood. I actually had to run away from home, and live in a foster home. And my dad was really negative on my writing. He wanted me to be a realtor like him, and I wanted to be a writer, and he just didn't want to see that. And so he was so negative about it, I actually changed my name so that he couldn't say anything more to discourage me, because you have enough negative voices when you're trying to get started. To have somebody purposely trying to tank you and everything that you do, it doesn't help you succeed, and it's a good recipe for failure if you don't get those people out of your life. So
Wow.
so
Well,
yeah.
I mean, you obviously started from a pretty dark place, and I'm sorry that we're digging into this, but I wanted to talk about how did you find the positive voices? Where did you find those positive voices that supported you as a writer?
Well, in high school, my teacher noted he actually had a science fiction class, and we were a little school, 5,000 people in Wisconsin, in that town. And so little school, but we had a really advanced teacher. Richard Gustafson was his name. And so he had a science fiction class that I took, and he noticed right away that I was a good writer. So he actually went to the principal and said, I want to set up a class just for Moon, only him. And every day for an hour, he'll come to my class and he gets to write. And the principal agreed with it.
Wow.
And so he would find me contests to enter, and I would write stories to them, and he would proof them for me and help me to send them out. I didn't have any money. I think he paid for the postage to, send out copies.
Wow.
And I won almost everything I entered, usually first place. And it was because I had a mentor in high school that cared about me. And it made all the difference for me. And then I wrote my first science fiction story after taking science fiction class, and that won the Scholastic National Art and Writing Awards, which is the biggest contest a high school student can win in the country. They published my story, The Last Ray of Light, in their science fiction, or their science magazine, Science World, and that went out to 500,000 copies per issue bi-monthly. So it's the biggest sale in my career, and I made it when I was 15 years old. I've never been able to beat
so, have you ever had any stories rejected?
Oh yeah, I've had lots of stories rejected.
But yeah, my first one at 15 years old was a rejection. Of course, yours first was like a national major award.
Yeah,
oh my God.
Yeah, it was great. So that really helped me, because my home life was crap, but and it was bad, That's why I finally had to run away to save my life. But this teacher took an interest in me, and so I wanted, to live up to him. I needed worth, and I felt I was always happy writing. And so, I just wrote and wrote and wrote, and that's how I dealt with all the pain inside of me. The weird thing was, I'd been beaten up so many times, I could only walk through the hallways looking down at a book or at my shoes. I couldn't look up at anybody because I had this fear if I looked them in the eye, I'd get hit. But once I was writing, or once I was in debate and forensics, I had all this power. So inside of me, there was something strong. But the reality was, I've been beaten so many times that dealing with people, it was really hard. But getting what was within me to come out and go on the page or to do speeches, that I came alive then, because I was in my element. And I think I probably worked extra hard. I mean, I would do research till 3 a.m. I think I worked extra hard at it, because this was the way I got my value and proved that I was worth something, because I've been told I was worthless so many times. And writing actually saved my life, and reading books saved my life, because I read them and I loved it that the characters could go through adversity and triumph. So that's a real big thing in my writing to this day is, I have downtrodden characters, but I want them to succeed. And I want the people I help with writing to succeed, because I know how painful it can be, and things that we go through to try to become who we were meant to be, what's hardwired within us. And that's the most depressing thing, when you can't, through circumstance and through people, having them put their foot in front of you, or shoving you down or kicking you down. It is really detrimental to your psyche and your whole being if you can't achieve what you want to become. So it's a very difficult place for writers, because it's not easy to break out anyway. And then if you have people in your life that are seriously engaged in trying to stop you from achieving your dream, which is it's sick because every parent should love to see their scholastic child excel, but I mean it happens. So, or friends that do this or whatever happens. So you just have to say, find a way to do your best to get them out of your life and keep the positive ones around you and say, this is who I am. I will never be happy if I'm not doing this. And you have to find a way to keep doing that no matter what people are saying, no matter what they're doing to you. You have to find that way. So, and fortunately for me, from the contest, I had a lot of good signs that this is who I am. So that helped me actually survive and keep from dying. So writing is very important to me.
Well, and it's very clear, as we're going to be getting to, is why you do what you do to help other writers. But before we get into some of that, I want to go back and ask. You talked about this mentor, this teacher, who helped. Did you ever get the chance to let him know?
No, because he was older then. By the time everything really started to take off for me, it was. I don't think he existed anymore, actually. So.
Oh man, yeah, because you have to go through all this stuff, and then you're like, oh my god, I won Writers of the Future. I want to go thank him. Whoops.
Yeah. Well, he would have been 95 plus or something. Wow. So I looked online to see if I could find him, and I didn't see his name anywhere with the school I was at. So I know it was so many years ago that he's not around anymore.
Well, but you are honoring him by
Richard
the stuff that you're doing to help other writers as well. You're kind of finding people and helping propel them forward and believing in themselves and becoming better at what they do.
That's, I work so hard. One of the things about, we're skipping way forward now, but I worked so hard to win Writers of the Future. When I finally did, everybody uses that to launch their careers. I mean, my friends all did, and I knew if I could win that, it would launch my career, and it did. But I thought, well, now I can launch my career. This is what I was working toward. And I thought, well, but now I know stuff that all these people that I've been working together with in the Writers of the Future Forum, they don't know these things yet, or they would have won. Why don't I write some tips for them to help them? And why don't I make a workshop? And I'll just work with them and help. I'll edit all their manuscripts. I'll write tips for them called the Super Secrets. And so I actually, right after I won, within like a month or two, I started Wolf Moon's Super Secrets Workshop and Challenge. And then I said, anybody that wants to sign up for 1 month, I'm letting anybody come in. And then for a year, I'm going to work with you, and I will edit your stories. I will write down tips for you. And this was all on a public forum. You just go there and you could read it. And so I had almost 20 people sign up that first time. And I just kept growing because after that, in that first year, we had 3 finalists in Writers of the Future in that first year. And all these people had never been published before, almost all of them. Okay. And then right on the cusp of year 2, when I started up again, we had our first winner. And she had won. She had only written 1 story, had gotten rejected. She read all the Super Secrets, wrote her story based on it. After going back through, the principles of it, she obviously wrote her own story, and then went back through and rechecked it before sending it off. And she won Writers of the Future. She hadn't written more than 15,000 words since high school. And then it just kept happening over and over and over. I've had over a dozen winners that I've worked with that have won the contest now, and so many finalists and semifinalists. And almost all of them were unpublished when they began. And then they won other awards. Many now have professional careers. So that part's been very rewarding. And I did it free all the way up till a month ago, but it's taking so much of my time that I finally said, okay, I've got to move this to Patreon just so I get reimbursed somewhat for all the time I spend with them. So, that's been great. So
that's a significant amount of work that you're putting in to help other people. And then it's kind of like a guy's got to pay the rent, right?
Yeah, that's the problem. It's that my wife was saying, look, she said, you're taking care of all these writers and their careers are all taking off. She said, but you have to take care of me too. And it's like, yeah, I don't want to charge people for this. She goes, no, you have to take care of me. So she was right. I have a responsibility to look after my family. And so you finally have to say, well, I love helping people, but I also have to make sure that my time that I'm taking away from my own stuff at least get some reimbursement for that. So that's where it switched. Unfortunately, my writing group, the Wolfpack Writers, they've been super good about it, and had wonderful support. It's only started a month ago. I have, I don't know, 50 plus paying members, and maybe 15 or so that are just on the free membership to watch what's going on. So
yeah, just checking it out. So
yeah.
and that's fantastic. So we are recording this early December 2023. For anyone who hears in the future, they hear this and think, what was a month ago? A month ago was probably November 2023, or was that October or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Wolfpack, because you talked about that importance of having a mentor, someone to help you, someone to guide you, but then you also, it sounds like having a community is also a really important thing. Can you talk, because again, you spent a year investing in a community of other writers and being there for them and supporting them, and obviously when it comes time to, like, okay, guys got to pay the rent, I'm willing to still help people, but I've got to be able to make ends meet here too. And then people just stepped up and said, well, of course, because they saw the value there too, right?
Yeah. So that's what's nice. And they all did, and I've made it, however I can help you stay in. I've worked with them to make sure that those who are less fortunate are still able to stay in. So my desire is always, how can I help you with what I know? So I don't know everything. But I know enough that people behind me could benefit from what I have to share with them. And that's what's happened. So all these unpublished writers started seeing all of these awards being won by people from my workshop. And they recognize, like, Writers of the Future is one of the hardest contests in the world for an aspiring writer to win, because several thousand enter every quarter. So it's worldwide, and they pay a really good rate, and you're in a best-selling anthology, and you can win a $5,000 prize. So it's, everybody's trying to win that. And so why is it my unpublished writers, virtually all of them unpublished, year after year, you'll hear 2 or 3 of them stand up on the stage, the big gala that they do in Hollywood, and say, thank you, Wolf Moon, for helping me get here. So, and that's rewarding to me. That was my benefit for all this, is that they didn't have to go through the decades of pain I went through. I got to show them there's an easier path, and it wasn't by paint by numbers. I don't believe in writing by a program. I believe if you understand the principles of writing, you'll know how to fashion a story that works, but you'll do it in your own voice. And your voice is your number one asset that you have. Nobody can do you but you. And so if you can understand what makes a story work and get that into your unconscious mind, when you're writing, it's going to start flowing into the proper format that judges and editors recognize that this is a professionally written story. This is publishable. And that's the problem, is that aspiring writers don't know that. They're in the dark. And so you'll still get there stumbling about in the dark, but isn't it better if you have somebody that's already been up the mountain and he says, hey, here's a clear-cut path. This is what I did to get here. And I'll show you, watch out for this spot. That's a bad one. Don't do a 15-page info dump in your opening. Almost all writers begin doing that, talking about their world, talking about their history, who begat who in their kingdoms. So I started seeing all this stuff when I was teaching the workshop. I realized this stuff is across the board. This isn't just stuff I had to work through. Every new writer has to work through. It was just shocking to me. They all do this. But it was very good for me to have taught all these beginning writers, because I saw wake up stories at the start are totally common. That's how everybody begins, because we all start our days, so we all want to do a rise out of bed. So I figured out why they were doing it, and then I told them to stop doing it. So or else do it really creatively, so nobody thought it was like what they've seen all the other beginning writers do. And then it just kept advancing from there. One of the craziest things is writers don't know how to do proper manuscript format. So I had all these super secrets. I was out to about 30, and they kept turning in manuscripts for me to edit, and they didn't know how to make a proper manuscript format. So I had to back up and do super secret number 0, proper manuscript format for the win. It's actually in the book that we're all talking about here today, How to Write a Howling Good Story. But I actually put it in here because I know the newer you are, the more you want to dress up proper manuscript format because it doesn't look exciting enough. We're creative people. We want to, put some polka dot jackets on our manuscript and chartreuse lederhosen and have it pimp our ride, and you have to tell people, no, plain is what editors like. They're used to this format. So this kind of stuff, I send it back to them and say, look at it again, and they come back and it still wouldn't be right. It's all right, go back and look again, and highlight what they need to do. And finally, after 3 tries, they get it right. So I recognize, okay, this kind of stuff needs to be written down and shown to people so that they start out on the right foot with editors when they send their stories out. You don't get a check mark immediately. An editor sees this all dressed up manuscript with cursive or something, and they're going to go, oh, amateur. You don't want them thinking that. So no strikes against you when you start out. So.
Yeah, and that's that first impression. So people have there's an opportunity to join Wolfpack, and of course we've alluded to it. You have printed materials now, ebook and books available in print. So this is sort of like packaging decades of your knowledge and insights that you've learned and taught to people over the years, and you've put it into 2 different books. This is one of them, How to Write a Howling Good Story, which just came out in November 2023. It's still warm off the press.
It is. What's cool?
Oh, well, go ahead.
We did a Kickstarter to launch this, and I had 330 backers. It did $21,000. It was my first Kickstarter, and let's see. Then I was invited into Kevin J. Anderson's story bundle, and then with it being a #1 new release on Amazon, Smashwords, and all these other places, and always in the last month since we released, it's been, it's gotten as high as #6 of all sales in fiction writing books. There was this upstart named Stephen King that wrote this obscure book called On Writing.
I don't think anyone's ever heard of it.
Yeah. But I was really close. I was right. In fact, I was featured right under him, top new release, so that was really nice. But anyway, so it's been doing real well. About 1,000 copies now have gone out since we released it. And that's a great start. What I'm really happy about is that it's going beyond this workshop that has a limited reach, and now writers all around the world can pick this up and benefit from the teachings. And I want to save them the time that I spent, and I've knocked years off other people's careers by teaching them these things. Understanding those fundamentals changes everything for you, but you have to know them. There's an opening chapter in the book. You can't ski what you can't see. This is a saying that we had when I was a skier. And it's true. If you don't know the course and where you're going, it's actually very dangerous. You can wipe out and you can hit a tree. I actually had a contractor friend hit a tree and die. So this happens. So in writing too, if you can have the course laid out, made clear, and if you're really fortunate to have a professional skier ski up alongside of you, or you pay them like I used to do once a year, I'd pay a pro to show me how to improve my skiing, you'll actually become a better skier. It just makes sense. The Olympics do this. When they want their amateur athletes to win the Olympics, they don't go hire another amateur athlete to tell them how to do it right. They go get a gold medalist and say, well, you coach our team because you did it and you know how to do it. And now we want you here on our team showing our guys what you did. So, and they say, hey, this is how you do a triple Lutz. It's, tighten it up, spin a little faster, pop sooner. They have all those little tweaking elements that take you from amateur to professional much faster. And that's why teams are so good, because they actually have the benefit of getting guidance from somebody that knows what they're doing.
Well, and I want to get into one of the details specifically from something that you talk about in How to Write a Howling Good Story. Again, perfect branding, right? Super Secrets, Wolf Moon Super Secrets, Howling Good Story, like all the stuff, right? It's all about branding, but
there's a method to my madness.
Yeah, no, I like that. Even the look, right? You've got the hat and the stuff like that. That's part of the look and feel. You've got a couple different hats that you wear in public for your author photos and in-person events. But let's go to, a lot of people talk about the importance of the character has to have a goal. They have to have something that they're interested in achieving, but you don't just stop at goal. You take it even deeper in order to get the writer to that the way to connect and feel with the character. Can you talk a little bit about goal versus, what do you call it?
Heart's desire. Heart's desire is the most important teaching that I share with. It's the most important principle, is what I should call it, because that's really what it is. Lots of writers and lots of writing books talk about what's the goal of your character, which really, what's the plot, what are they after, and what are the events that will lead them to this goal. But heart's desire goes much deeper. Heart's desire is what is most dear to your character, something that will kill them, crush them if they have it taken from them, or something that they want so desperately that they will do almost anything to go get that. And so if you go to that kind of level of your story, you have the emotional punch that's necessary to take a story from just being a good story. You know, James Bond stories are fun to watch, but they're all on what's his goal, who's he after, you know, how can he stop a thermonuclear war, you know. But the newer ones actually has a love interest, and he actually has revenge when, I don't want to wreck it for people, but most people have seen Bond. He actually becomes a deeper character that we actually care about, because he's not so savoir-faire about killing people and things. He's got a motive personally about how he lost this woman that he finally had love in his life and that he lost. And that made those stories so much better. The character was so much deeper. And that's what Heart's Desire is all about. And then I link that. There's a chapter in the book on it. Heart's Desire / reader hero bond. Because if we see the heart and what they care about, and if it's something we personally also can identify with and care about, we latch on to that character, especially if we put them behind the 8 ball and they are crushed, and the inciting incident happens, it becomes the soul crushing event that takes this away from them. And the rest of the story isn't just about what's their goal, it's will they get that back in their life, because their life is destroyed if they don't have that. And that makes award-winning stories. That makes stories that people talk about. When they shut the book, they remember that for the rest of their life, because their souls, we have empathy. You know, empathy is your pain in my heart. And if you can do that with a fictional character that doesn't exist, you've performed the deep magic that only special writers can do. But you can learn that if you realize it's there, and you realize that's what these big writers are doing, that have people, you'll have a whole career based on people coming back for that character because they love them. There's actually a psychological condition that people have where they actually fall in love with your characters. And for a writer, that's not a bad thing to have if you want a career, when you have readers that actually fall in love with your characters, because they'll want to see them again and again and again. So. Anyway, that's the Heart's Desire part.
Well, you know what I love about that is, as you're talking about great stories and creating great characters and all of these things, you can really feel the passion that you have for wanting to help writers. That's right. It's not like there's just this, like, I'm going to put on a chalkboard and then it's going to be dusty and old or whatever, but you're living it, you're breathing it as you're sharing these tips.
Yeah, well, like I told you, you know, the pain I went through. What I didn't tell you, I got to a point, I actually, back after high school, I got involved in drugs, and I ended up in a hospital. And I said, okay, I don't want my obituary to be drug addict died. And, you know, but I felt so low that I took risks with my life. I didn't care, even with all the awards and stuff. And so for 10 years, I didn't write or read anything. I burned all of my awards. I burned everything I wrote so that I could burn my bridges behind me, because I didn't have control over my creative side. And it's just what I had to do. I know it will sound crazy to a lot of people, but it actually got me from going back to the things that I had a private scholarship to a private college that they wrote specifically for me because of all of the awards I'd won. And I signed that away so that I wouldn't be around the people that I was associating with at college, that I knew I would get pulled right back in. And for 10 years, I didn't write. I didn't read books, and I didn't listen to music, because the music would bring back, you know, all of the drug experiences. And so I cut myself off from all of that. And after 10 years, I found myself in our walk-in closet, and I was just crying. I was in the walk-in closet because I didn't want my wife to hear me crying. And finally, I thought, I can't be happy if I'm not writing. I'm not being fulfilled doing these other things. And yeah, I was good at other things, but there was only one thing I knew that would fulfill me as a person, and I was denying myself that. So I went to my wife and I said, Jules, I said, I think I can handle it now if I start writing again. And she looked at me and she was scared because she knew where I'd come from. And we'd met after that, but she knew what I'd been through. And she said, if you're sure. And I said, yeah. And then right at that point, the Nebula Awards came to Eugene, Oregon. And that was because Dean Wesley Smith was there, Chris Rush were there with Pulp House. And they actually got the awards to come to Eugene. And my wife was watching cable TV local channel, and it announced them. Jerry Oltien was on talking about it. And so she said, why don't you go to the Nebula Awards? They're right here in town. I said, okay. I went in and registered, and Dean Wesley Smith was standing right behind the registration counter. He goes, you're from Eugene? And I said, yeah. He goes, how come I've never heard of you? I said, well, I'm just getting started writing again. And he said, have you written anything? Have you had anything published? And I said, well, yeah, I had this thing back when I was in high school, and he asked, how much did they pay you? And how many copies? I said 500,000 copies. And Dean stopped. He goes, you're a published writer. And he shook my hand. And for the rest of the convention at the Nebula Awards, Dean took me around to everybody, Tim Powers and Gene Wolfe and all these great writers. Have you met Moon? He's a published writer. Have you met Moon? He's a published writer. And I was so red-faced, I was like a lobster after that. But at the end of the Nebula Awards, I realized I must have done something special that Dean Wesley Smith felt it was so important to introduce me to everyone. So even though that was a long time ago, it must have been important. And that helped me to keep writing. And then I had some more awards and sales shortly after that. So I got back on my feet again because of, this restart. So I've had a few Phoenix moments in my life, I call them. So, but this one's really sticking and this one's really going. So I'm really happy about this one.
Well, and it's kind of funny because you have somebody of Dean Wesley Smith's caliber also being that mentor type figure that's affirming the fact that you are a real writer, you are a writer, and you are somebody. And again, like that high school teacher who saw that in you, Dean saw something, and was right, like, yeah, how am I gonna get you out here and introduce you to the various folks and stuff like that. So it feels like that's the kind of thing that you're doing again for other writers now.
Well, and then what Dean did is he said, do you know about the Wordo Writers, the group that meets here in Eugene? And I said, no. He said, well, I'm going to introduce you to them and get you involved with them. So he put me into a community, and that community happened to have Stoker winners in it, Nebula Award winners in it, World Fantasy Award winners in it. And I'll tell you, having your manuscripts critiqued by a group like that is tough for a new writer. It's brutal, but you learn. So yeah. You learn what you're doing wrong and also what you're doing right, which is important too.
Yeah.
But the most important thing you realize is these are people just like me. I now know them, and I know them personally, and they did it. And so if they can do it, and they're still doing it, I watched them bring in Nebula Awards. Jerry Oltien brought one in, and Bruce Holland Rogers brought one in, right while we're in the workshop critiquing one another's manuscripts. And we'd meet once a week in the library. And you realize, well, they're doing it. They're just people. Why can't I too? So, and then you start selling. So, because you not only need to have the fundamentals of what makes a story work, but you also need to have the belief. Those two things. If you don't have the belief, you'll never stand up to all the rejection that comes at you because you're an apprentice wanting to be selling in a pro field. And you won't be able to sell in the pro field until you get to that professional level. And in almost any career, it takes years of apprenticing before you become a master and right. What you have starts selling. So if you can be in a group where people actually have mastered their craft, you can start realizing, okay, I can get there too. They did this, this, and this to get there, and so start duplicating that in your own career. And it makes the belief becomes reality. And that's what I have my writers in the Wolfpack Writers Group. I have them write down, belief determines reality, and I have them stick it on their monitor. And every day I want you to look at that. Belief determines reality. And that's why so many of my writers, as they see other people in the group succeeding, I say, don't be jealous for them. That's you. They just got there ahead of you. They maybe have been at this longer, have more time. Some of them have more time to write than others that are taking care of families. But if you can see that someone else did that was unpublished when they began, well, you're unpublished too. Guess what happens if you do those same things? So it's just a matter of time and putting the effort in, and it'll finally click if you stay with it. But so many writers give up because rejection is hard, and to take years of rejection can make you stop believing in what you know you are within. And that's, with a community, it helps to alleviate that because you're watching others succeed along with you. And if you all keep working together and sharing what you know, you can all work as a team. That's why I call it a wolf pack. We are all the sum of our members, and we all can help one another succeed. So the group that I'm going to read this quote. It's who I dedicated the book to. So I'll read you the dedication, if that's okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. So, dedicated to my Wolfpack Writers Group that have run beside me on this journey. For the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. Rudyard Kipling. And that's what I believe. That's what I've taught my writers. And as we work together as a team, we've watched people win. And so, like I did my first Kickstarter, it did $21,000. That's a good start. But then what I did is shared that with the group. Here's how you do it. And then David Hankins, one of my writers, he had won Writers of the Future. I shared with him how to set it up and what you need to do to succeed. He did $9,000 with his story that he built from his winner in Writers of the Future. He made a novel out of that on his very first Kickstarter. You know, and I've watched big magazines try to get that kind of money in their Kickstarters and haven't succeeded. So this is what it means to work as a pack, especially if you got someone that's ahead of you that's willing to take the time to show you how to get there, you know. So it really helps because, you know, just doing it on our own can be, writing's lonely business anyhow. We sit alone in our man caves and she caves and we write. And then we have the world saying, you're weird. Why are you always alone? And why don't you come outdoors with us and do things with us? Because I won't get anywhere if I don't write, you know. So it's really nice to be around other people that get it, and you can feel normal with them. That's why going to conventions is so important too. That's how you and I met at Superstars, you know, and you realize there are other people like me and they're doing the work too. And they're not weird. This is how they succeed. And I want to succeed. I want to be like them. You know, you have role models, and nobody's there putting you down because you want to try to be who you are, you know. So it's just wonderful. It's like, it just takes all the weights off of you so that you can fly. And that's the beauty of having a group and associating with other writers.
That's fantastic. As we get close to wrapping up our conversation, I always like to ask my guests, what's some bit of advice that you wish more beginning writers had? So beginning writers listening to this, they're seeing all the things you've done. Where do you usually say, what's a good place for a beginning writer to start?
Don't go it alone. Find a mentor. Your objective really should be to find someone ahead of you on the path, wherever that might be, and find somebody that's just ahead of you and have them, you know, become friends with them and see if they can share with you what they did to get there. So writers are usually pretty open about this, and that's because they remember the pain and the trial that it took. If you go too high up on the food chain, it probably won't even help you anyhow. And they're so busy at that point that it's really hard for them to take the time. They do it through workshops or on their websites or newsletters. They'll share things that way to help out. But you know, going still above you, but a little bit lower and trying to get in a circle like that is going to help you advance. And you're going to learn things from that group. If you're in a group where everybody's at the same level and you're all critiquing one another, you're going to stay pretty much at that same level, because until you got somebody in the group figures out how to get past that. And then the question is, will they stay with you, or will they go seek something higher to help them out? So anyway, finding that is important. If you can't find it, you can pay for it. You can get into groups where you can pay to be members of groups with professionals in them that are helping you. So you can hire an edit, to give you, some help so that you can see what you're doing that's holding you back. So anyway, find your tribe, I guess, is what people say. I say find your wolf pack, but have a group that you're working with. Maybe you'll find them at conventions. There's Superstars, a great one. If you're indie, 20 books to 50K is an awesome one. So those are some great ones. I teach at LTUE in Utah, Life, the Universe, and Everything. And that group is really focused on science fiction writing. So if you're a science fiction writer, that's a great place to be. So look for not just fun cons, or fan cons, but actually for writing cons where the writers are there, because you'll find your people there. And especially if they're doing what you're doing. If you're a romance writer, then you do an RWA thing, So
of course,
you seek what the group that will help you succeed in that field.
And so for people who've heard some tremendous advice from you in the last half hour, but people who are interested in seeking more of Wolf Moon, where, pray tell, can people find out more about you online?
All right. So it's Wolf Moon, WULF, Wolf Moon, and you'll get a lot of weird stuff coming up if you don't get the U in there. So fun stuff. But I want you to find me. The best way, if you can think of thesupersecrets.com. Okay, The Super Secrets. So Wolf Moon Super Secrets, if you can see that there, it's thesupersecrets.com. And that's my website. And there's links to how to get the book there if you go to The Super Secrets on it. If you want to hear some of my podcasts, there's free podcasts you can listen to on narrations that I've done for some of my stories. If you'd like to get the workbook, this was made to go along with the new book. So that's a spot there. You can do that.
Super Secrets Illustrated.
Yeah, it's the workbook. Actually, I wrote articles I write for Dreamforge. So every issue of Dreamforge has an article on the super secrets of writing. And each one's illustrated. That's the beauty of that magazine. It's beautifully illustrated. And so I took this robot. I said, can you do me a robot that we run as a recurring theme, that he's writing and learning and acting out all of these different principles? And they said that's what they did. So they made this cool robot, and he's in all these different scenes. And it's all full color. So that's how I made the workbook then, is I asked Jane Knoll, who's their illustrator, can you put this all together for me from these articles? And we came out with this beautiful workbook. So anyway, thesupersecrets.com, and the Patreon, again, Patreon.com/Wolf Moon, WULFMOON.
And there will be, of course, all links to all of that at the show notes for this episode at starkreflections.ca. Wolf, thanks so much for hanging out with me today.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate working with you.
Such an inspiring conversation with Moon. And the two things I really wanna pull out and reflect on from this. So again, such tremendous value and insight when it comes to writing a really solid award-winning piece of fiction. And this is a really great resource that I know is going to help writers. I know the illustrated Super Secrets, the articles are just impeccable, because I got a signed copy from Moon last February at Superstars Writing Seminars, where we got a chance to sit down together. And of course, obviously, I am the publisher of How to Write a Howling Moon, how to Write a Howling Good Story by Wolf Moon. And again, have benefited from, going over that so many times and learning so much as a writer. But this is a really important lesson that's come to me in many aspects of my life, not just this interview with Moon. And it's come up multiple times in the last month or so. The importance of not denying who you are. Not denying the things that give you pleasure. Not denying being your true self. Not letting other people repress you from those important things. And that's not easy. There are so many situations or so many circumstances where we can't be ourselves. I couldn't fully be myself in the hometown I grew up in. I did not have anywhere close to the oppression and anxiety and concerns and fear for my own safety that Moon had. But I did live in an environment that did not nurture my writing. Not that I didn't have nurturing parents, I did. But I didn't live in a realm that nurtured what I wanted to do with my life. There's probably many aspects and many elements and influences in our lives that have that negative impact on us, that can have those consequential impacts on us that they don't even realize are taking us away from who we want to be, and maybe not even doing it intentionally because they may not understand. We may not even have had the ability or the way to properly share and express what we're feeling inside. It happens a lot. I, in particular, I'm not good at confrontation. I am not good at personal, verbal confrontation. I work with words, my fingers on a keyboard. That tends to be how I can express myself. When I go to say things, I get emotional, I break down, I'm not good at that sort of thing. So even expressing who I really was difficult for me. So I want to recognize that as creators, as people who want to tell story, want to be storytellers, etc. That's not an easy thing to overcome. But I want to remind you that it is something that's important. Because when we deny ourselves from being who we are, we're denying some of that happiness from ourselves. And it's worth exploring and it's worth questioning. And here are some of the ways that, and this is my second reflection, it kind of leads into this, is sometimes there are influences of people who understand us, who get us. Moon talks about going to conferences and connecting with people who get us, who just understand. Oh my God, they are like me. I just got back from an amazing Rush tribute concert in memory of Neil Peart, performed by Why Not and a whole bunch of amazing guest musicians. And it was just Kevin Anderson said this best. He said, "I feel like I'm with family. I'm back with my family." And it was my first time meeting. I mean, I knew Kevin. He was the only person I knew. I met people from Cambridge, from next door to Waterloo where I lived, which is amazing. They went all that way as well for this, but I felt welcomed. I felt like part of the family, and I was the stranger, and I was welcomed right in there. And Michael, who was Neil Peart's security guy, and he rode motorcycles with Neil in the last 20 years of his life. And Neil wrote a lyric in the Rush song Limelight that says, I can't pretend a stranger is a long-awaited friend. Now, Neil was brilliant at what he did, but he was never really comfortable at being held on a pedestal. And everyone, believed they knew him because they've been following him for decades and decades and loving his music and everything. And they felt like they knew him, but he felt really, really uncomfortable being worshipped. And he just wanted to be another guy. But I remember saying to Michael, thanking him for welcoming me, for making me feel like a long-awaited friend, even though I was such a stranger. And he said to me, like, you're a good friend of Kevin's, and Kevin's a great guy. Therefore, you're a friend of mine. But finding your people in those groups where you can share the passion for a musical group. And Rush isn't just a musical group. Rush is a magical experience. Those three gentlemen working together just created something truly magnificent. And that's what writers do too, right? You create something truly magnificent. So having those people that can understand you is an important element. But then finally segueing after a really, really long segue into the second one was that impact that Moon's high school teacher had. And the impact later in the interview that Dean Wesley Smith had when he first met him. And Dean, such a gracious guy. Dean, again, welcomed me in a very similar way and made me feel important and special. And I love that mentoring that he's done with so many writers. But those, I can't remember the name of Moon's teacher, and he mentioned it a couple times, and my apologies, but I don't even know if Moon's high school teacher or Dean even realize the powerful impact that they had, that they could have on someone else. How they, just by being there, just by listening, just by reaching out and offering a handshake or friendship or to introduce them to someone else, how much of a dramatic impact that could have. I had a writer recently reach out to me and mentioned something that I had said to them that made them feel not alone, that made them feel welcome, that made them feel like we were two peas in a pod. Admittedly, I don't even remember this particular instance, but I'm so glad I made the effort to make that other writer feel valued and important. So that reflection is me reminding myself to always make the effort, to always reach out. Because chances are there's a writer out there who's denying who they are, who's denying all those things that are valuable and important to them. And if I can take even a moment to reach out and to let them know they're not alone, that's so important. There are things you've probably done in your life that you don't even realize the positive impact that you've had on another person just by being willing to listen, just by being willing to reach out a hand, just by being there and ensuring that they know that they're not the only one. I'm so glad that Moon and I had a chance to have this fantastic conversation. I'm so glad, I am so lucky that I get to share it with you. I'm so lucky that you are listening to this podcast. So thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. A reminder that you can become one of the patrons of the podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections. But there are other ways you can support. You can say hi and thanks. You can leave comments for episodes. You can leave reviews for wherever you listen to the podcast. And best of all, you can share this podcast with someone else that you think is going to find some value in these episodes with wonderful folks that I get to interview, like Wolf Moon. So thank you so much, dear listener, for letting me bend your ear yet again for another episode. And so until next week, and until next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.